You know what's interesting? I used to watch knitting podcasts all the time. Every week I had my lineup of podcasts that I would watch. But now, recently within the last couple of years, I don't watch knitting podcasts anymore. And it's not because I stopped loving them. It's because something happens when you create the same kind of content that you consume. And I think it's something worth talking about. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Midweek Ramble. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. Today, we're talking about something that's been rattling around in the back of my mind for a while, and actually was brought to the forefront of my mind when someone asked me if I could share some really great knitting podcast recommendations with them. And that thing rattling around in the back of my mind is why I don't watch knitting podcasts anymore. And just to be clear right off the bat, this isn't a critique on anyone's content. And it's definitely not about not supporting other creators or any kind of an encouragement for you to stop watching knitting podcasts. Not at all. I love this community and I love that it's here and I want it to thrive and to flourish. And I want you to enjoy consuming that content for as long as it brings you joy. This is really more about the mental space I've realized that I need to keep my creativity and my content authentic. To make sure that when I sit down here, I'm bringing my own rhythm and not something heavily influenced by someone else's. Because once you cross that line from viewer to creator, something in your brain shifts. The way you experience the content changes completely. You can call this the mirror effect. When you're watching for fun, you're just taking it in. But when you're watching as a creator and through the lens of a creator creating similar content, you begin to mirror it. The tone, the cadence, the structure. For some creators, they can find themselves beginning to talk like other creators with a similar cadence to their own voice. Same pacing, same phrasing, same rhythm, and then I cast on this, and then I finished this, and then I bought this. And it's not copying, it's just how the human brain works. We mirror what we immerse ourselves in. It's pattern recognition. It's just human psychology. But when you're trying to find your own voice, or you're trying to evolve your voice and your place in the grand scheme of things, that can really make things difficult. You start anticipating what kind of content you should be creating, what kinds of things you should be saying next, what kinds of directions you should be going in, as opposed to the things that you're interested in, the things that you want to say, the ideas that you have that have come out of the ether from just your own experience and meditations. Not to say that you should veer off of whatever kind of content niche you're a part of, but there's a lot of times within your work within that niche where you're thinking about various different things about that, and in this case knitting, and you have ideas and things that you want to share that might seem kind of nuanced or maybe obscure, but you want to be able to communicate them with people who can relate. But if you feel like that's not something you hear other people talking about and you want to stay in that lane of the momentum that other people are creating, you're never going to break out of your box. And it actually kind of reminds me, you may see behind me right here, this was a gift that was given to me by a student when I was teaching 4th grade. And what it says, if I can get it to focus on that, it says, think outside the box. And it's a box, which I think is interesting. And very simple, right? We've heard this a million times. Think outside the box. Here's the thing. It was probably about a year and a half ago where I really felt like my venturing outside of the box was almost putting myself back into the box. I noticed that you might step out of the box and try something different, but then the box grows and then it now surrounds you again. And you want to move out of that box. You want to try to let your outlook and your perspective and what you have to offer within a niche, you want that to evolve. And I feel like it's really important to allow that to happen. And sometimes when you immerse yourself in that same kind of content that you create, you don't allow yourself to move free of the ever-expanding box. And this is especially easy to fall into in small creative spaces and niches like the knitting community. There are a lot of us out there. It is a large community of people, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a very small niche in terms of content creation and finding content available to consume. In small creative spaces, we're all orbiting around the same trends, the same conversations, the same yarn drops, the same patterns, the same sweater constructions. It's natural. We're all excited about the same things. But after a while, it starts to feel like a shared current. Some might even call this an echo chamber. I'm going to use the term shared current here because I feel like it fits more in line with what we're talking about. When it comes to content creation, I notice this when I step back. I notice the thumbnails of videos sharing similar angles, similar layouts, similar color schemes, the same phrases, the same cycles of enthusiasm about the same things. And again, that's not a criticism. It's actually kind of a beautiful thing. It's a shared language, and shared language and shared enthusiasm brings a lot of us together in ways that's really meaningful. It's just that as a content creator, trying to bring new and fresh and unique and engaging things to viewers like you, that current can begin to take you before you even realize you've stopped swimming. That's when creators start thinking, well, this is how a knitting podcast should sound. This is the format of a knitting podcast. Instead of thinking, well, what's my rhythm? What's my format? And how can I bring this content within this niche to folks in a way that is engaging and new and enriching? These are important questions that I ask myself all the time. And it can be very daunting and very stressful, but you have to ask yourselves these questions as a creator of really anything that is put out in the world for people to enjoy. Something else that happens is that you stop watching the content for the same reasons. You stop enjoying it and you start analyzing it. You're noticing the editing choices, the lighting, the pacing. You're dissecting structure instead of absorbing the storytelling. It's like trying to read for pleasure, I imagine, after becoming an English major. You can't stop reading critically. And even when you're not trying or actively engaged in comparison, it sneaks in whether you like it or not. You start measuring how often they post, how long are their videos, what are they knitting, how are they framing their shots, where are they sitting, what kind of a space is it? And that quiet hum of comparison can eventually drown out your own creative voice. That's really the heart of it for me, and that's why in the last couple of years, I've chosen intentionally to step away from viewing content that is similar to the content I create. It provides me with what I like to think of as a sort of creative quiet. It's that stillness in your brain where you're not influenced. And that's a really difficult place to land in this world that we live in regardless. And I'm not completely there in every aspect of my life, but I try to make sure I can be there when it comes to what I put out into the world creatively. If I can avoid being influenced in any one direction, I can really allow myself to listen in that creative quiet to my own creative voice so that I can bring forward things that I find are valuable and maybe original. And it's not always going to land like that. Not everything that I bring to my YouTube channel is completely original, not by a long shot. But I know for sure it's coming from my own place of interest. It's coming from my own thoughts, my own experiences, my own questions, or my own viewers that come to my channel and provide me with things that I can talk about and provide to them in a way that's nuanced and unique and very Wool Needle's hands. And I absolutely love that. And I'm afforded that because I limit the input from similar content creation or content creators online. Now, of course, when I stopped watching knitting podcasts, it wasn't like I stopped watching anything. I like to diversify my input. I feel like I wanted to watch content that was creative, just not necessarily in the way that what I provide here on the channel is creative, just not necessarily within the world of knitting, which is where this channel resides. I watch pottery videos. I watch videos about archaeology. I love history channels, video game design and video game walkthroughs, film analysis essays, art analysis essay videos, and sometimes just watching somebody sketch in their sketchbook. Things that have nothing to do with knitting and yarn, but yet have inspired me greatly within this niche. And this isn't just a content creator thing. We all start to echo whatever we find ourselves around often, especially online. If your entire feed is filled up of people who knit or read or post beautiful studio shots, you start to absorb that rhythm. And what you do with that rhythm and all of that you absorb is really indicative of the effect that that is having on you. You start measuring your own progress. Perhaps you even measure your own joy by what you see reflected back at you. It's the same shared current, just on a more social scale. Maybe you notice yourself knitting what everyone else is knitting, or feel like you should have something finished every week because that's what's always on your feed. And that's not bad. It's just what happens when you're surrounded by sameness. We start to move with the current, even subconsciously. And I want to emphasize here, and while we're talking about shared currents, I don't think this is a bad notion. I think that a shared current, or dare I say even a creative echo chamber, is a good thing from time to time. Sometimes they're the safest place to find yourself when you're still trying to figure out your own creative voice. When I first started knitting and first started producing knitting content here on YouTube, those knitting podcasts and Ravelry roundups were priceless. It's the roadmap that I used to figure out what I was even doing here in the first place. And it really has me wondering if I need to do one of those watch with me where I watch my very first episode with you guys and we all cringe together, because I'm here to tell you the very first episode on this channel is cringe worthy. Absolutely. I don't know if I would want to even revisit that, but it could be good fun. I'm just saying. But when I first started doing that, I needed that shared current. I needed to be able to see what other people were doing so I could figure out my place in all of it. That overlap was comforting. It was like being surrounded by voices that say, you belong here. You're part of this community. Shared currents can give you language before you have your own. They help you build confidence, vocabulary, and taste. They're training wheels, and training wheels aren't bad. It's just that you eventually outgrow them and you have to allow yourself to outgrow them. It's kind of like once you know the rules or you feel the community vibe or you understand the way it operates, you then know ways that you can deviate from that while still being a part of that community, because that's called bringing your own flavor to the table. And that's really important. And it's really interesting because as I'm sitting here talking about that, it makes me kind of feel like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that you assimilate before you sit down at the table, that you have to be assimilated before you can even join the group? And I don't think that that's the case. Because you can do what you want. When you step into a community, if you have your creative voice and you know who you are and you have it proudly pinned on you as part of you and you show up at that table, you are only bringing value. However, there are a lot of people who hesitate to step up to the table because they don't know what their creative voice is yet. They're not exactly sure where they're going. And if they have an opportunity to hear some of the voices within that community and figure out how they can pull themselves through with that, I don't know, support system, and maybe even mimic that vibe a little bit just to get themselves in the door so they can build their own confidence, then that's also okay. And I know a lot of content creators now that are very new to making YouTube videos or new to dyeing yarn or new to sharing their creative things on social media in general. They do that. They emulate a lot of what they see because it's really one of the best ways of learning how to step into a particular creative space. And once they're within that box and they feel confident in that space, that's when they can start venturing towards the edges and the periphery and maybe even venturing outside of that space where they will then find their own creative voice. And it's almost like for some people, for an awful lot of people, it's a rite of passage. I think it's what most people have to do to help find their creative voice. There are a select few of us unicorns out there who have a creative voice right out the gate and they bring it. And I think that that's phenomenal. So if you are one of those people, then more power to you, because I think that's great. But there are a lot of us that don't have that built in. And so having a shared current, following the vibe of what's going on before you develop that creative voice is really important. So for anyone watching who still finds a great deal of comfort moving with the current, that's absolutely okay. And it works for you. And if it brings you joy, like I always say, then that is the right thing to do. The trick is to notice when the current stops carrying you forward and maybe even starts to feel like it's pulling you under. That's the moment to swim out a little bit and find your own pace. And I think when I started to feel that, which was about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, that's when I really started to push away and to try to find something new. And I've gone through that evolution more than once. It's not just like within the last 1.5 to 2 years I've done this. I've done this several times since I've started my channel. I find that the box has now made its way around me or is coming in. It's shrinking around me a little bit. So I push out of the box and then the box grows back around me again and I push out. And I think that everybody needs to do that. In fact, of the podcasts that I have seen or thumbnails I've seen come across or out of curiosity I've clicked to see what's going on, I've noticed a lot of content creators within this niche, knitting podcasters, I can say, that are doing the same thing. And that's really beautiful because that shows that we are evolving as creators with not only not demands, but the interests of our viewers, but also the interests of ourselves. We're finding that our own creative energy and our own creative musings and thoughts are coming forward in our videos maybe a little bit more than they used to before. The whole definition of what a knitting podcast is changing. And if I can be a part of a changing definition of what that is, and maybe it starts to broaden or become even more rich and nuanced, then I'm all for it. And I think that's fantastic. And again, this doesn't mean that I'm stepping away from the community or that I don't support other content creators. I absolutely do. And I think that that's quite clear. I love seeing what people are making and the conversations that are happening. I just realized that constant immersion isn't the only form of support, especially when you're a creator within that same niche. In fact, I think sometimes the most respectful thing that you can do for fellow content creators, your peers, is to stay creatively distinct, to not unconsciously echo their rhythm, but instead add something new to the mix. That's its own kind of support, in my opinion. That's what's been rattling around in my head lately, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I'm coming to this as a content creator within the niche of knitting. Many of you may be coming to this just as a knitter who shares their work on social media. However you are and whatever your thoughts are on this, I'd love to hear your take down in the comments. Let me know, keep me posted. It always means a lot to listen and read the comments that are down there, and I hope that you guys engage with other folks' comments as well, because there's a lot of fantastic advice and perspective. And thank you for your patience with my missing video on Sunday. I needed to step back for some of the reasons that I mentioned here today, and it was very refreshing, and I appreciate you guys and your patience and for being here today. In the meantime, happy knitting, happy making, happy whatever it is that you are doing. Take care, be well, and I will see you on Sunday. Bye.